Chapter 8. Book Pavilion. You want to read? Seema Lai shouted aloud and started coughing as he choked on the food, after which he stared at her with a bewildered expression. His huge reaction made the whole kitchen focus on their young master. Their interest peaked as they craned their necks and threw curious glances over. In fact, one couldn't really blame them for their reactions, as the other name Seema Yu carried with it was trash, and having only attended the academy for 2 days, other than recognizing a few words, a book had never been seen in this young master's delicate hands. Not to mention reading a whole book. A sudden mention of wanting to read a whole book and going to the book pavilion was shocking news indeed. Cough, cough. Seema Lai readjusted his mood and returned to his usual calm demeanor and said, "Since you want to have a look, let's go have a look." As soon as he said it, he strode out of the kitchen in large steps as Seema Yu quickly followed behind. They came before a large courtyard with a 3-story building. It was a simple-looking building built in the middle of a plain-looking yard. No one would have guessed that this inconspicuous building would be the book pavilion. "Here we are, the book pavilion," Seema Lai introduced as he flipped his hands and a large key suddenly appeared. After retrieving the key from his interspatial ring, he unlocked the door and gently pushed it open as the scent of musty books greeted them. This was the first time she had been here. Although the book pavilion was located in between her courtyard and the main entrance, the past Seema Yu had never once ventured in here. "Here, this key belongs to you." Seema Lai casually flipped his hands once again and retrieved another key and handed it over to her. All the other 4 brothers each had a key to this place. However, as she did not enjoy reading, this key was never passed to her, for fear that she might lose it. Seema Yu took the key and put it in her pocket. She could not cultivate and had no spiritual power, hence she could not use the interspatial ring. "All right, go ahead and read whatever you want. Take your time, I've still got some things that I have to do. I'll be in my study. If you need me, you know where to find me." Seema Lai turned to leave after granting her access. Seema Yu nodded, and only after she watched his fading back did she turn to take a good look at the interior. Although she knew that there were some problems with her current body, there were still some differences with the herbs and materials from her world, and this, at least she hoped that they were merely name differences. She needed to know more about the differences in the properties as well and study these more thoroughly to be able to cure herself and rid of this trash label herself. Seema Yu gaped in wonder as she looked at the interior of the book pavilion. Who would have thought that the exterior, which looked like any other common building, but the interior was unexpectedly different. What attracted her attention most was that right in the middle of the book pavilion, there was actually a grand spiral staircase, which connected all 4 stories, and each level had books that were placed in shelves that reached the ceiling. Such grandeur and splendor. Moreover, the scale was totally different. From the outside it did not look as big as what she was currently looking at. Surprisingly, the size of the first floor was as large as that of a soccer field. Although each level got smaller, however, the size of the top floor was still bigger than a basketball court. "Oh wow, what sorcery is this? This is simply too mysterious." Seema Yu cried out in shock as she tried to compose herself. This had outrightly defied her logic and common sense that she was used to. Ever since she's been in this world, everything had left her agape. Things that she had seen from her memories were still foreign to her, and it felt as if she was watching everything from a television, and experiencing it herself still roused the adventurous spirit within her as her eyes sparkled with excitement. She was particularly fascinated by the vast disparity of scale and grandiose. After she had finally regained her composure, she grew anxious. With so many books, where should I even start looking? If I had known earlier, I should have asked grandfather. She sighed with regret as she looked on helplessly at the grand collection of books before her. She started exploring the books on the shelves, and after looking for a while, she discovered that the books were arranged according to different categories. If this row of books in this shelf was in one category, that following 10 rows were in the similar category. "Haha, found it!" she cried out in relief. After scouring for an entire 2 hours, she had finally found the category she had came here for. She earnestly started to look for the books she needed as she carefully combed the shelves that housed the medical-related books. She looked for quite some time until she found a book about the various herbs and materials for medicine, and discovered that this whole shelf had the same genre of books. Her stomach rumbled and she touched her belly as she groaned in defeat. She quickly pulled out several books and hugged them carefully and left the book pavilion, locking the door securely as she left. By this time, day had already turned to night and it was completely dark outside. When Sima Yu returned to her own courtyard, Yunyu and Chun Jian noticed that in the arms of their young master were a pile of books. They hurried forward to assist, and asked, "Young master, would you like to have dinner now?" "Yes, I'm famished. Bring the meal directly into my room. Also, Yunyu, please pass the message to my grandfather that for the next 2 days, I will be dining in my own room and will not be joining the family for meals." Sima Yu rubbed her belly before returning to her room. Chun Jian immediately went into the kitchen to prepare dinner for Sima Yu, while Yunyu brought the pile of books and placed them on the table before passing the message to Sima Lai. Sima Yu picked up a book and started reading. The books that she had selected this time round were all very general and were introductions to the basics of herbs and materials that were common in this world. It was a good start to help her identify the various herbs and materials and let her have a grasp of the differences of the two worlds. In her previous world, her intelligence quotient was higher compared with ordinary people, therefore whatever she studied took only a fraction of time. In addition, she originally majored in the study of traditional Chinese medicine, so she was very familiar with the various herbs and properties. Moreover, she was just looking for the differences in these aspects, hence her reading speed was exceptionally fast. By the time dinner was prepared, she had already flipped through more than half of the first book. When Chun Jian came in with dinner, saw that her young master was browsing the book in such a flippant manner, she could not help but shook her head. It was evident her young master was not reading it properly. "Young master, your dinner is ready." Chun Jian placed the meal gently on the table. Sima Yu immediately put the book down, and her gaze rested on the dishes placed on the table. Seeing that the steaming hot dishes that were visually enticing was a stark contrast with meals before, she smacked her lips and gave a satisfied nod, and said, "This is what I call a meal." She guzzled her dinner down heartily, and as soon as she was done, she called for the two maids to clear the table and she continued to read into the night. After she read finish the first book, she discovered that here, the ordinary materials for medicine were similar to her previous world, but some had some minute discrepancies. For example, the name was different, or some had similar properties, but there were also some unfamiliar names that she came across. However, she discovered that this set of books that she had brought back was from the same shelf and it was further segregated into the similar materials and properties. Realizing this, she quickly looked up according to each particular material and herb and studied them carefully. "Luckily I went through these books first. Almost half of the names are different from before." Sima Yu stretched her body lazily and stifled a yawn as she looked at the prescription she had written down before realizing that dawn was soon approaching. Because she did not manage to get a good sleep last night, and she worked hard throughout this entire night, after she relaxed, her eyelids were extremely heavy. She crawled to bed, and as soon as her head touched the pillow, and she fell into a deep slumber. Tonight, she did not have a single dream, and by the time she woke up, it was already noon. When she opened her eyes, she looked around groggily as her eyes focused on the ancient pattern of the mosquito net. For a moment there, she thought that she was dreaming. Rumble. The hungry belly started to protest, making her consciousness slowly return, as memories flashed in her mind reminding her where she was. She put a hand and touched her forehead, and muttered, "So this is not a dream." She finally rolled out of bed, washed up and changed. Chun Jian quickly prepared lunch and brought it into the room. After lunch, she took the prescription that she had painstakingly written down last night and walked towards Sima Lai's study. When Sima Lai saw Sima Yu, he was somewhat surprised. Wasn't it only last night that she said that the next 2 days she would be busy reading in her own room? Why was she out so soon? She couldn't sit still for just 2 days. Or, did anything happen? "Grandfather, I have a matter to ask you." She straightened her back and looked at him earnestly. "What is the matter?" When Sima Lai saw Sima Yu's serious appearance, he waved his hands and signaled for the bodyguards to exit. Sima Yu pulled a chair and sat down across from his desk and said, "Grandfather, do you know why can't I cultivate?" Chapter 9. Expelling the poison. All the doctors who have examined you before had all diagnosed that your meridians are blocked. That's why you cannot sense the spirit energy in the air, rendering you unable to cultivate. When your father carried you back, he mentioned that your mother was injured, and that might potentially affect the fetus. That might have been the reason, as it might have affected the development of your meridians. Why? What's the matter? Why did you bring it up again? Sima Lai cast her a strange look. Grandfather, I suspect the real reason behind my blocked meridians is not because of a congenital cause, but for another reason, Sima Yu said cautiously. Are you saying? Sima Lai's eyes went wide with shock as he looked at her. Sima Yu nodded, saying, I have been poisoned, and it is the cause of my blocked meridians. After analyzing further, the reason I can't cultivate, and this matter is certainly related. Quote. Bang! Sima Lai stood up suddenly. This abrupt movement toppled the chair that he was sitting on. Is what you say true? Sima Lai looked at his delicate granddaughter and asked. Sima Yu nodded, and pressed on. I'm sure, grandfather, this poison is rare and not easy to detect. And this poison has been in my body for a long time, seemingly it looks like I was poisoned at the time of my birth. Quote. The emperor has sent quite a few people to check your condition several times before. What more, they even comprised of renowned doctors and alchemists. They could only determine that your meridians are blocked and did not detect any trace of poison. Sima Lai said. Sima Yu knows that the emperor of Dongchen Kingdom, Xing Zantian, had been very fond of Sima Lai. He had certainly sent the best of the kingdom over, so if even they could not detect the poison within, it showed how rare that poison was in this world. Maybe the poison is very rare in our kingdom. Furthermore, there's no other symptoms other than the blocked meridians. If I had not touched the 2 small points under my arms, I wouldn't have found it out too. So it's normal that no one else could detect. Sima Yu said. When your father brought you back, he said that your mother was injured, so he felt that your development may be affected, but I did not expect that your blocked meridians was due to poisoning. Sima Lai sighed with regret. Grandfather, wasn't I born at home? What did you mean by, when your father brought you back? Sima Yu felt that Sima Lai was behaving a little odd as she tilted her head in query and asked. Cough, when you were born, your parents were not in Donglin City, and your father only brought you back when you were around 6 months old. He said that he had to go look for your mother and left you in our care, and has never returned. Sima Lai said wistfully. How did you discover that you were poisoned? Who diagnosed it? Tell grandfather, I want to look for that person and get the antidote for you. Quote. Sima Yu shook her head and said, Grandfather, don't worry, no one else examined me, I found it out myself. Quote. You found out yourself. Sima Lai gave her an incredulous look of disbelief as he looked at Sima Yu, saying, Don't lie to your grandfather, what can't you tell grandfather? Did that person make you say that it's a secret? Quote. Sima Yu remembered that the previous Sima Yu was completely useless and did not harbor much intellectual knowledge. If she were to suddenly say that it was really her, Sima Lai would definitely not believe. So she took out the prescription and said, Grandfather, here's the prescription for my cure. Allow some people to get these herbs and materials written down. Remember to do it with utmost secrecy. Well, grandfather knows what to do. Sima Lai nodded, and he reached out and took the prescription from her to have a good look. Although the words were a bit ugly, but considering her illiteracy from before, Sima Lai nodded with satisfaction as he called out. Come, follow this prescription and bring the medicine back. Yes, General. 2 bodyguards came in and they carefully took the prescription and headed out to perform the assigned task. After settling this task, Sima Yu leisurely walked back. After returning to her yard, she locked herself in her room and continued to read. She was going to have to spend more time to look through these books, as she had to study these more intensively and in depth to gain a better understanding. Soon, the prescribed herbs were sent over to Sima Yu. She took those herbs and checked them thoroughly. Only after determining that they didn't have any problem did she get Yun Yu to prepare the medicine. She had even given out specific instructions on its preparation method. After having them prepare the bath, and ensuring that they had all left, did she slowly step into the red medicinal water. Once she had completely immersed her body in the medicated bath water, she felt her whole body burn up as if on fire, as an intense pain assaulted her whole body. Damn it. Didn't think it'll hurt so much. Sima Yu cursed out loud as she writhed about in pain. Her whole body felt as if there were flames lit on it and burning every inch of her body that was soaked in the medicated bath. The medicinal bath soon came into effect as she felt another surge of energy fuse together, further intensifying the heat, and she felt as if her body may explode any moment. The red medicated bath water soon turned clear and her head felt foggy for a moment when suddenly she felt a sweet sensation well up in her throat. Before she knew it, she vomited out a mouthful of black blood and continued vomiting out more black blood on the floor. After she could no longer spit anything out, she finally felt better and regained some clarity. It's a lot smaller now. Sima Yu muttered after touching the two little dots under her arm. It seems like it's going to take a few more sessions to completely clear this poison. She sighed and gritted her teeth, thinking back on the pain she had to go through. As soon as she came out of the bath and dressed herself, she kicked the huge wooden barrel and the whole barrel tilted slightly as a huge amount of bath water gushed onto the floor, washing the black blood away. Young master, is everything all right? Yunyu and Chunjian asked from outside with a slight quivering voice. Oh, I was a bit careless and accidentally spilt the bath, can you come in and help me clean it up? Sima Yu replied lazily. The two maids quickly scuttled in and saw that some of the water in the bath had spilt onto the floor. They hurriedly brought in dry cloths and cleaned the whole floor and removed the wooden barrel soon after. The next few days, aside from having her meals with Sima Yu spent her time burying herself in the books. She had almost completely finished reading the books she had brought out from the books pavilion the last time. In the blink of an eye, 7 days passed and this was her last medicinal bath. Sima Yu immersed herself in the red bathwater once again and after a quarter of an hour passed by. This time, the blood that she vomited out was no longer black but it had familiar vibrant crimson shade. She quickly touched under her arm and found that the two small dots were gone. She took her own pulse and confirmed that the poison had been completely removed from her body. Although she did not know if she could start cultivation after removing the poison, she still could not conceal her happiness as she felt a wave of exhilaration and excitement. After she used the same method to wash the blood away like previous days, she grabbed the huge key and walked briskly towards the book pavilion. This time, the books she wanted to look for would be those on cultivation methods. She wanted to ascertain if she could embark on her cultivation path once the poison had been completely flushed from her system.